And you mentioned for you that led towards owning your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to own my time, right? And I was like, how do I own my time? And then I was like, I'm going to start my own business. And I was like, what am I good at? And I was like, well, I'm good at seeing data, and I can almost visualize it in my head. And I was like, data is kind of the information. It's what flows through the company. It's kind of like the blood in the company that delivers, it takes the information to the engineering department so they can make some drawings, and then it goes out to production and they make it, and then it flows to accounting, and accounting takes the data and turns it into revenue, right? And I was like, wow, this is crazy powerful. And based on my electrical engineering, like we look at electrons and we modeled it, and we think of electrons kind of as moving through pipes, and through wires and stuff. And I was like, oh, data for me is like electrons moving through wires, and I just understood it because of my background. So I was like, I'm going to do data analytics. And this was 5-6 years ago. And I was like, this is powerful stuff. Now you can visualize it with tools like Power BI, right? And I was like, oh, wow, you're translating. Comes from the cultural language thing I was experiencing when I was young. I was like, wow, if you break down the language barriers and you take this information that nobody understands, these spreadsheets that people look at, and they're like, what does this mean? And now I can give you a chart and says, if you want to change your company and make, increase productivity and make more money, here's the visual and here's the plan, right? And then like my eyes lit up. I was like, I got to do this. So that drove me. I was like, I can do this. Started the company. And then 3 years ago, I got into AI, which kind of accelerated the whole thing. So
yeah, and I can tell you get passionate when you're talking about data, and not a lot of people do, and I'm excited to dive deeper into it. And
I didn't pace myself.
You mentioned the looking at data and translating it kind of like different languages.
Yeah.
And just like understanding that just because what that Excel spreadsheet says, or that, table that you're looking at says, that doesn't mean that your manager that you're trying to explain it to says that. And I experienced that pretty consistently with clients that we're working with. It's like, the manufacturing engineer or the guy out on the floor knows exactly the flow that he wants the product to go through the shop, because he's calculated it all out and created all these different tables, but he can't get buy-in from leadership. It's so clear. It's right here. Yeah. But you got to put it in a format that they can understand, right? And you do that in a way that everyone can communicate together on. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to diving deep into what you're doing today.
Yeah.
But I'm going to save that. We're gonna hold on.
All right.
I'm gonna back up a little bit. You've made some intentional decisions throughout your life. One's getting into starting your own business. One's where you wanted to raise your family. One's how you wanted to show up for your family. What are some other, if you had to think through intentional things that you've done throughout your life, what are some things that you'd say, hey, that's helped me become who I am today out of an intentional decision?
Intentional decision. So this is kind of interesting, like, education, curiosity, value that so much. But the winters here are hard. And this happened about, 6-7 years ago. I was like, I told my wife, Liz, I was like, we got to move. I can't take these winters. But she's like, no, Charlie, like, our kids are loving, the school here, West Ottawa. They go to West Ottawa. She's like, they love the schools. It's one of the best schools. You can move jobs if you want, but we're not going to leave this, and I reflect on that. And this is the teamwork thing too. I'm glad she did that, because, and I value education so much, and like a good school system. And that's why we stayed, right? Because the education system, I see it around here, is they value it so much. And now that we look back, that's a great decision for the kids, right? And that's my priority now, reflecting back. That was before I started my business, right? So, but it all aligned together is, right now the priority is spending time with those kids and setting up with an education and, critical thinking and a way to succeed in this new future, right? With AI just everywhere now, how are we going to set up for this next generation a better future for them?
Yeah. No, that is a great example and a great story. So thanks for telling that about how you're intentional with your education for your kids. and how you brought your wife into that conversation, how she said, nope, this is the way it's going to be. Can you tell me a little bit about her? What does she do? And
she, well, we met at, I was an intern at Delphi Electronics in Kokomo, Indiana. She was working there. We met there. She is a math, computer science undergrad, and then she got her MBA. Like, you know, and I do want to tell this story. Like, she amazing, you know, but, you know, and she's gone through the regular cycles of, she has so much value that she can contribute, right? But, you know, when women pregnancy, you know, they come out of the workforce, then they have to go back in, you know, and then she wanted to spend time with family, and then she had to go back and she had to start over every time, you know, and I was like, man, she has so much to contribute to society. I was like, we aren't, you know, and she complained about this too. She's like, I just don't feel like my full potential, you know, I have all this education, all this I can contribute. I'm just not reaching my full potential. And I want to share this story for, you know, the listeners, right? And so she came to me one day. She's like, I want a new job. I want it to be remote so I can do what you do, which is spend more time with the kids too. But she's like, but I want to make a bigger impact, you know, but I'm scared to apply for these jobs. And she's like, I think a lot of women have this fear of, if they don't have the skills on that job description, we're not going to apply. And I'm not confident answering those questions with, I'm going to learn that skill for you. You know, she's like, I need to know these things. And I was like, but Liz, you know how I used to make job descriptions? I go on the web, Google, you know, find 3 or 4, cut and paste all the words in, and then recreate a job description, right? Because as a hiring manager, you're trying to move forward. And so I took AI at the time, ChatGPT, and I entered her within her resume, her LinkedIn profile, and job description. I was like, hey, this is a job at Penguin Random House, the largest book publisher in the world, and it's 100% remote. It's in New York City, but simulate 2 things for me, for my wife, based on her resume, and help her interview for this job. And it simulated, you know, and it took her weaknesses and showed her that it was her strengths. And she practiced that. And I, you know, 2 weeks later, I think she looked at the job, and, you know, after a couple rounds of interviews, and 2,000 people had applied because it was hot at the time, right? 100% remote. And a couple weeks later, she got the job, right? She won the lottery, and she, you know, it's been, I think, eight months now, and she loves it. Her group loves her. She's making an impact. You know, it's just matching people's skills with the right job and allowing them to flourish, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll pause there for.
No, I'm very curious about the story, and I'm glad that you brought it up, and how she felt entering and exiting the workforce. I know that I've experienced that a little bit in my family as well.
Yeah.
When our son is 7. When he was, and he's our firstborn.
Yeah.
I have a daughter that's 3 as well. But when my son was born, my wife had a great job that she loved to do, and she enjoyed every minute of it. Intentions to go back to work, but then when it was 2 weeks, she took her leave, and then 2 weeks to go back into the workforce, and we had the daycare all lined up, and they ended up getting shut down. The daycare that we were going to send the school to, or send our son to. For abuse to kids under the age of 1, like in the classroom that he was in.
Oh, no.
And so it was like this tearing for her too, of like, oh man, I want to be a mom.
Yeah.
She loves her job too. I think at that point it was a pretty easy decision. She just grabbed the kid and like, it was like, well, I'm not going back to work. But it slowly is like, she's driven, right?
Yeah.
Very, you know, driven person. And I can understand that a lot of different people experience that as they had that transition in life of, all right, I went to school to be a professional, you know, in the workforce, and that's what I know. And now it's getting flipped upside down. I'm having to do these other things, but that's very fulfilling too, as well, into my personal life. And then how to have AI support that. I love that story, and be able to, I think you phrase it as, I forget how exactly you said it the other day when I heard you tell that story. It was very much AI helped my wife get a job or something. Like it's very true that AI is helping people get jobs too.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like people always look at it like the other way of like, it's taking my job.
Right.
Can help you too.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I want to add too that what was most fascinating was it did a SWOT analysis on her resume, you know, and a SWOT analysis on Penguin too. And it said, you know, you come from automotive, furniture. They've been, you know, publishing centric, right? And so use that as your window in. Say, hey, I'm different, but I bring in new ideas, you know, and use that as your strength. Don't say it's a weakness. Because she had been telling me that. It's like, I haven't been in publishing. And this ChatGPT was like, no, like these are your strengths now because they bring in new ideas. They're going to want new ideas. Another thing was they've been a New York-centric publishing company for years and years and years. And now with her Midwest experience, they're like, you can sell that. Like, hey, my strength is I'm from the Midwest, you know, bring me in, you know, and so she went in. And I think the other thing was she went in with confidence. You know, this thing was like, these are not your weaknesses. These are your strengths. And they're going to see this because we've analyzed them. And these are their weaknesses. You know, they've been centric, New York, publishing. You bring in all these fresh ideas. So go in confident. And she did. And she won the job. Like that was probably the most rewarding thing for me after this analysis was how confident she was. You know, she went in with just full confidence. I was like, oh, to see your wife, such confidence and to land her dream job, right? It's just so rewarding to see that.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's getting me excited to get back running some tests with AI. And that's a big part of a lot of conversations that we're having these days, just in business. I mean, you're involved in a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious now, when you started your first business, we talked about that you love data, right? So that was a big part of it, that you wanted to do something that you enjoyed, something that you loved. You saw inefficiencies in the workplace. So you said like, hey, you know, I can be more efficient and maybe work less hours and do what I love all at the same time. I'm curious, was the financial piece of it a big part for changing jobs? Did you feel like, hey, I can make more money working for myself versus the 9 to 5? Or was it the opposite?
So I think my family, my parents, my in-laws, I had talked to everybody and, you know, money wasn't the main goal anymore. It was more to spend time with kids and to have my wife support that and say, you know, and we had a lot of discussions because then she, you know, I didn't know if I would make any money when first. And so she became kind of the primary breadwinner at the time. And we had to talk through that shift, right? In our roles that we had traditionally been, you know, taught. These are the lanes you stay in. So, you know, and then we also had a discussion and she said, you know, I want you to do this because I want you to spend more time with the kids and spend time teaching them critical thinking and all those other life skills. And I don't want you to go to work 8 to 5 because I value that time you spend with them, right? And so that became more valuable than the money I would get potentially. So, you know, I had some of those dreams, like potentially the cap when you just start your own business, right? There's no cap anymore. Like you decide, you know, how much time you want to do it. Yeah. You're betting on yourself, so you can make as much as you want. But I realized that's a lot of work. You know, a lot of the sales, you work in the business, you're working on the data, and then you gotta, you know, the job dries up and you're like, oh, I haven't been doing any sales. You gotta go back and do that, back and forth. So I've got kind of used to that. You know, I had to reevaluate what I wanted to do. And my wife had too. It's like, you can always go back to the corporate world if you want to. But now I asked my wife the other day, we were going for a walk. Well, this was a couple of years ago now. You know, I had been working for about 3 years. I was like, you want me to go back to the corporate world to get the 8 to 5, to get the regular paycheck? And she's like, I've never seen you so happy. You know, it hasn't been as much as in the corporate world, my pay, but she's like, I haven't seen you so happy. Like, and you spend time with the kids, don't ever go back. You know, she told me that. So
that's validating, you know, to hear your partner say that, especially when a lot of times we put a lot of weight into the physical part of finances, right? And the race towards bigger bank accounts and the race towards those things. And sometimes we are so fixed on those things that we don't have that priority, or we have different priorities.
Yeah.
Where that's in front of, spending time with kids and family. It's hard to realize that sometimes.
Yeah. And you were asking about what are those moments, and that walk with my wife when she validated that, as a group, this family unit, we're looking, what we value is our future for our children, their education, time with them. So, then it's less about money and more about what we're building together.